Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast. Today we talk about navigating rejection. Now, if you're a tech founder going out to pitch for capital for your company, it can be quite tiring and a hit to your ego after hearing so many no's. Today's podcast, we will talk about the different strategies that you can deploy to make sure you stay resilient and the strong leader that you need to be for your startup. All right, I wanted to create this segment for all the founders that are out there who have made an attempt or several attempts or even hundreds of attempts to go out and pitch their company to investors. Now, it's a long process to develop a company, but even a longer process to get capital. Why is that? Because typically what happens with the founders is that they have a very big vision, and that vision is taking some time to realize. It doesn't happen overnight. Yet, immediately, they perhaps are 10, 20% into building that full vision, and they need some startup capital. So a story needs to be built about where they're at today and where they intend to be tomorrow. So essentially, pitching the startup, ask any investor. I've been part of it with many of my founders at previous startups, that it can be a daunting process, very daunting, especially when you face many rejections, right? And now, however, rejection is actually an integral part of the process of fundraising or pitching, right? By adopted, if you have like a strong growth mindset, the way you got to see it is, it's a no doesn't mean like, hey, your project is really bad. It just means not for us, or no, not right now, not today. Every investor has their own reasoning, and not saying that sometimes it isn't, your project doesn't make sense. It could be sometimes just their understanding or how it was explained that maybe it just doesn't make sense to them. Okay, so every single time you get a no from an investor, you should take that opportunity to really take notes and ask why. Ask the investor, what was it about my story, my pitch, that didn't make you feel compelled to say, let's look further, or let's do some more investigation, or just a straight up no, right? So what are the most effective ways then, strategies in which that you can improve your ability to pitch as strong as possible? You may still get no's, but how do you reduce that, those no's, and increase your chances for more yeses? So in this episode, that's what we talk about. So let's get right into it. Because by learning from rejection, you can grow stronger and propel your startup towards success. And regardless of whether it's for fundraising or building your product or establishing product market fit, establishing revenue models, that's what it's all about, right? You gotta try, see what works, see what sticks, pivot. We all got to continue moving in life. This is life, right? And it's not going to stay static. One of my favorite sayings in life is, the one thing you can always count on in a startup, you can bet money on this, that things will change. Definitely, things will change. So the first bit, and I'm going to go through a few points, and I'm really sharing this with founders, because if you're in that state of mind, even those, you got a strong day where you said, that investor said no, but I'll show him, I'm going to get money and he's going to miss his chance, right? But instead of looking at it from that point of view, maybe it's just embrace it. Embrace a growth mindset. Be grateful for the information and the feedback that you got. These guys are making a decision on many different factors probably unknown to you, right? Your project isn't the only one that they're looking at. So it's crucial. Actually, this is one of the main things that you can adopt as a founder, which will help you in all aspects of your life. You're talking about how you manage your team, how you build your company, how you manage the people in the company, which I just said team, okay? But you can manage your personal relationships, right? If you're married, if you've got a significant other, if you've got siblings, right? Having a growth mindset allows you to bring in a lot more positivity and openness, in which that you can take learnings from failures, from annoyances, and need to project that into yourself and understand how to use that information for good. Okay. So instead of viewing each no as a rejection and getting very emotional, this is just business. So you got to detach that emotional element and go straight to the black and white, right? So if the investor does not see that there's potential growth in your company, it's just an opinion. There's no right or wrong. He could be right if you give up. He could be wrong if you continue and you make it happen, right? So by adopting this mindset, you can actually find more success in many different ways. It may be that you learned something from the pitch that you want to pivot your pitch, and you provide more clarity for the next time you're pitching around, right? So there's a lot of different ways that we can look at this that will use it as a valuable tool to improve your delivery of your pitch. And recognize you can ask many other founders that it's not unique, receiving a lot of yeses. Now, I'm sure you've heard these stories of founders being able to raise like $50 million in a very short amount of time on the back of a pitch deck. Nothing is built, no MVP, no proof, just a really good story. Usually those things, when they happen, it's because of many other factors. The network of the founders, let's say a lot of these guys are college buddies coming from, a school with a lot of wealthy people. Well, in that case, they could find a lot of money fast, right? Because people will use their previous relationships and the trust they've already built. So, we never know, right? Some of these people who raise money, and then what usually happens is, let's say anyone influential that puts in the first 5 million, then it kind of trickles. Oh, so-and-so, my buddy VC, he knows these guys from college and he vets them out and thinks that they're the right team to make this happen, and it just builds up. But that's not reality for most people, okay? So use the growth mindset, embrace it, own it. And if you don't know about it, there's a lot of tools out there to really understand what the growth mindset really means. And so along the back of that is seeking feedback for growth. So it's one thing to have your own perspective and analysis of what went well and what went wrong in a pitch, but what you should be doing is you should be actively asking questions of the investor, because otherwise, if you walk away and you make all these assumptions that you didn't really validate, then it's not really helping you. You might be making changes to your story, your pitch deck, that really doesn't make sense. So once you get that rejection, you might, just communicate, okay, well, what happened? Where did I confuse you? It's a good question. Was there any area of the pitch that maybe needed more understanding, like it didn't really pop out, the value proposition? Or even ask, what do you think the value proposition is of our company? What do you see as the nut, if we can actually solve this problem, that would make us succeed, right? What is it, what problems do you think is a very tough problem, maybe too difficult for our team to solve, right? Because there's an expectation of what they see out in the market, and who's doing what out there, and maybe just think that your team is not strong enough. I mean, it is a consideration. You got to take all this feedback going back into your analysis as you kind of redevelop your pitch. And then, you should really take every opportunity to pitch. And so, what I'm talking about when you refine your pitch or get feedback for growth, you should put yourself in a position, even if the investor is very small, you got to keep on trying it out and getting feedback and making sure that you have good process to receive the feedback loop, right? Um, but by actively seeking this feedback, you're obviously demonstrating a growth mindset, a willingness to learn. And it definitely can help to improve, refine your pitch, make it stronger, especially when it comes down to like explaining your business model, your revenue model, things like this, right? It may give you some new ideas as well, right? So you take all that stuff, and third bit is consume all that information. And you really need to go through it, because maybe not everything that you took note from one investor is relevant to redefining your pitch, but you should take it into consideration. So you got to use each rejection as an opportunity to refine, and enhance your pitch. So you need to use every opportunity that you have, each rejection, as an opportunity to refine and enhance your pitch. Emphasize the problem that you're solving, the market opportunity, the unique aspects of your solution, right? You should always be finding opportunities to practice your pitch extensively. There's this one time when I took a class and we're talking about selling from the stage. And you may feel like you're a good communicator, but until you actually put yourself in camera and see how you're delivering it, it's going to look all different. It's different than what you imagine in your head. That's what I'm saying. And this might be something that you might want to do yourself, is record yourself. From your body language, your posture, your eye kind of focus. I mean, if it's only one investor, there's only one investor. But the important thing is, let's say you get asked a question, you're not sure, and when you're thinking about how to respond because you really don't know, if investors are smart and they see your eyes go up, usually they can tell that you're really not sure. It's little things like that. Whether or not the investor sees it, they see enough people pitching, they will pick up on some of these cues. So it's very important that even though you're getting feedback directly from the investor, there's many times there's things that are not said, right? They're not expressed to you because they think it's not important. Are they going to tell you, well, when I ask you that one question, I saw you roll your eyes up, so it made me feel that you didn't really know your stuff, right? They're probably not going to say that. Or they could. I'm just saying that they might not think about that. They might say, oh, I had some confusion here, and I think this business model needs to be tightened up, so on and so forth, right? So that's actually an important tip that I think that any founder should really do. And you should be honest. You should be able to tell the story. And actually, the reason isn't only for fundraising. You, as a leader of the company, should be able to take this information when you go to talk to a journalist, when you're presenting at a conference, when you're on some webinar, when you're on another podcast as a guest, right? You need to be able to talk about your company, how it's going to be built, how you're driving the strategy, so on and so forth. I mean, all this feeds into how you talk about the company. And you're the main salesperson, to be honest, right? I know a lot of CEOs that I've met in the past that are very into just building a product, and they'll say, oh, we'll market it when the time comes. We're not ready yet. It's too early. We don't want to spend the funds. And it's just no salespeople, no staff, just building, right? And then it happens for so long, and many companies actually overbuild. And But where CEOs should be spending the time, they should be out in the community. They should be meeting people. They should be looking about fundraising. They should be finding mentors. They should be connecting with people who have built something and has made it successful. I mean, founders really need to continue to build out their network of knowledge, right? So that's important. So the fourth tip I want to give, so we talked about, let's rewind, right? We said embrace the growth mindset. Then we said, seek feedback for growth, right? So look out for it and take all that feedback and refine it, not only from investors, but from doing a videotaping. You might want to write it up and send it to someone who's really good at writing, right? Script writing, perhaps. Let's say for a movie. And that's a good one too. If you know someone that's actually very good at script writing, like you're delivering it in a movie, it's amazing. If you imagine it, if you can deliver it as you're an actor, right? Because it will have that impact that you want. So that's number 3. Number 4 is actually researching your investors. So this is important. Why? Because when your investor decides no, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of different reasons, and you need to find out what those reasons are so you can better understand them as an investor, and most importantly, if they could be a potential investor in the future. Okay, so like I mentioned, the rejection does not mean that your startup is lacking potential. It may be just a mismatch between your business and their current investment strategy, right? So, for example, this past year, we know that the economy has been tough. A lot of VCs lost their money last year. People got to make money. You're an investor. You got to make money. What are you going to do? What's the betting horse you're going to put money on, right? It's not an easy decision. So, it's kind of like, all right, let's invest in companies that build maybe a B2B product, right? Business to business. And business to consumer, these days, I just been hearing people, it's not so exciting for investors. Because why? Because customers are, I guess it depends on the platform, but if you're trying to generate through, let's say, a product that customers will spend money, they kind of feel like customers are tightening their belts. They're not looking to spend money, and the market isn't there. Like, the amount of disposable income has changed quite drastically. Interest rates have gone sky high. People are losing their jobs. So obviously it's impacting the whole world. And, there's they don't really see investing in a B2C company, right? So that's just an example, right? So their investment strategy says, oh, maybe B2B, they go ahead and pitch because they're still curious. They still want to see what's being developed out there. Maybe like, for example, it's a social media app that monetizes in a completely different way. But so they'll take a look at your project because that's part of the job, and they also want to learn like what people are doing out there. And if they say no because it doesn't match their investment strategy. So you got to conduct a thorough research. I know it's not the easiest thing but if you're, for example, wanting to set up a meet with an investor, maybe you can have some qualifying questions perhaps before you even waste their time. I've met a lot of investors, and sometimes I have some companies ask me to help them with the fundraising. And then what I do, that I'll talk to investors, hey man, what are you looking at these days? And they'll just tell me, right? Not saying that they won't be open to anything else, but it's very clear what they're looking for at that point in time, which could change. That's what I'm saying. A lot of times you got to understand who the investors are. For example, you've got an investor, the money is backed by family offices, right? So these are families that want to take, let's say, 20% of their wealth, and they want to put it into technology, right? And early stage, right? So let's say examples like that. So then the guy's got to, the person now going out looking for projects, they need to decide, yeah, we can go into the tech startups vertical or certain verticals, but what is the expected return that we want eventually, right? What's the timeline and time horizon? So look, I'm not going to go deep dive into strategy, but that's the whole point. You need to understand how they're using the money and what they're investing in. And then that in itself, if you at least know that they say no to you, but they're looking at tech companies still as 20% allocation of the funds that they're investing, at least you know that. And you can come back another day. Especially if you've got a first round of funding, you built some traction, you've got some recognition in the industry. It might be easier to come back to these same guys because they've known you and they've kind of vetted you out. Why not? Why not look at you a second time around, right? So you look at their investment portfolio if they have one, their sector preferences. These are questions you can ask. Some of the past investments that they're proud of, and tailor your pitch for your company by targeting the right investors. That's the whole point, right? And it takes time. I mean, honestly, if you're asking money from anyone, you gotta expect it takes some time, right? And you either do that or you find a way to build your own revenue, which is something that we can talk about another day, because there is a narrative for some of these businesses that you shouldn't actually take in startup capital unless you absolutely need it, or after you've actually, bootstrapped it for as long as you could. Okay. All right. Number 5 is building relationships for future opportunities. Okay. So once again, investor says no. It's no for today. It could be yes tomorrow. And even though it's a no, you should be asking, well, is there anyone in your network that you think would be interested in this project? I'd really appreciate a referral, right? So, so it doesn't, you need to maintain that relationship. They may not refer. They may want to invest later, even though it's not exactly in line with their investment strategy. You got to keep it warm, right? You shouldn't just discount them just because they said no at that point in time. It's no different. I don't know if the founders have ever worked and tried to pitch journalists themselves. Journalists themselves, if you're trying to pitch and build like your own network of journalists, a lot of them will probably say no, not now, because the people that they write for, there is a focus on a topic or what's trending. News is a different space because they're trying to drive traffic somewhere. They're trying to get eyeballs, attention. They got to fight through the noise, so they want to make sure they've got a juicy story, right? But anyways, the whole point, and I don't want, I'm digressing, that the relationship as a CEO, you should always keep warm, right? And I think if you're thinking about it from a very high level, strategically, it's good too. Why do I say that? For example, let's say you're trying to build rapport, build a relationship with a strategic partner, and you find out later that they're also looking to raise funds, and you're able to open up your network, to some of the investors that that you think that would be a good match. That is providing some solid goodwill to build rapport and trust in a business relationship. So I think you got to look at investors as sort of like a platform for yourself that you can create and own relationships. Nothing wrong with that. Then it's also good to keep them updated about your progress. If they said no, it might be yes in the future. They might talk about it. I think quite often they like, oh my gosh, I said no to these guys, but they got $5 million of funding. And in this last year, right? This is 2 years ago. In this last year, they brought in $6 million of revenue, right? It's gonna get out there, and usually investors, they're in tight circles, or they'll talk about it because everyone's trying to share like deal flow. Everyone wants access to good deals, right? So I think people are willing to share, especially when they hear something good. So providing regular updates to maintain the relationship, even as simple as like, when you're referring quality companies, like I mentioned, you're building business relationships, someone else is looking for funding, you can feed that to investors. I mean, you're just building long-term relationships, but you're always going to need when you're building a business for the long term, okay? So it is very, very vital maintaining relationships at all levels, whether it's PR, influencers, industry leaders, community leaders, associations, things like that. It's all vital for any early stage startup. It's very, very vital to their long-term success. Then the last bit, number 6, is basically getting yourself out there. As I mentioned, founders aren't meant to be behind closed doors. They're meant to be out there telling their story, to tailoring their story for different audiences, to get that feedback, to refine their story time and time again. Go network, go to industry events, look for like-minded entrepreneurs, look for potential mentors, look for other successful founders, and learn from them, especially those who have overcome objections, and learning yourself how to overcome them and how to manage them yourself. And you just gain, the whole thing is you got to get out there and meet people. I know it's a very digital world. Me, myself, what I like to do is I try to engage with people on different platforms. I'll reach out to them. It does take some time, but I think what you need to do is not just go out and spray and pray, right? You can't just meet all these people and follow up with one or two, right? And it could be that way because we're all very busy, but the reality is when you're in conversations online or even in real life, you really need to establish whether or not there's something there. I know it sounds horrible to some people, but if there is, you kind of put out there what you're looking for, or you already know what you're looking for, and you're trying to find that need, and if that person is not a match on any level, meaning not today, not tomorrow, not in the future, then you got to move on, just how it is. And it's really hard because it's almost like, and how do you do that? I think, we're all human. We really want to spend time to get to know someone. And there's always this, you never know who someone else knows. You can't just discount them so fast, so on and so forth. So there is that. But there's a way to manage it, and something that I'll probably talk on another podcast about how to manage networking an event. All right, so once again, establishing a strong network will only support you during difficult times, right? It opens the door for you in the future, right? Because there comes a time, especially as how I kind of started off this podcast, when I mentioned in 2023 or 2022, there were a lot of investors, a lot of FOMO activity, investing, and what ends up happening, they lost their money, right? They were so quick to invest their money because they didn't want to miss the gravy train, and they lost their money. But in difficult times, when you create the relationships and strong relationships and the trust, especially you've been around for a while, they will most likely, they meaning investors, will be highly likely to go back to you, because especially what's going on right now. Investors are very careful about who they invest in, right? And they don't want to invest on the new boys on the block because everyone's talking about them. They are more likely to invest in someone that they've talked to before, built rapport, and if you've advanced your business based on your projections, even though if you're a little bit off, for sure, investors will probably want to come back, right? So in conclusion, the one thing I need to put out there in such as life, there is many problems to solve when you're pitching, right? There's not one pitch that's a one-size-fits-all. I think if you're any kind of salesman and you're any level, you've got any level of influence, you really need to be able to secure the conversation in a manner in which relates to that investor. This is what we do in conversations every single day, right? That's why it's very important to do your research on the investor so you know how to talk about your project to that investor. For example, if they're new to, let's say, a health tech space, you need to pitch a little bit more information in areas so they kind of get it and make it really easy for them to understand, right? So there's lots of things. Always remember, if you want to get that money, if you're looking at expanding your business, and this is long-term for you, you want to make sure you focus a lot on telling your story every single opportunity that you get. All that really does is help refine the way you deliver it, and that's not a bad thing. That's very good. So remember, today it might be a no, but it could be a yes tomorrow. All right, thank you so much. I'm going to wrap it up here. I hope this comes off as a very good topic for founders to strengthen your mindset, grow that mindset of yours. So that concludes our podcast today. We hope that you learned a lot. And the one thing, key takeaway, every single no, find out why. It will feed back into delivering a better pitch the next time around, and also maybe unblocking some areas of information that you have not provided in your pitch. So take that as an opportunity to grow until you get that yes. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll check you out on our next podcast.